my American Bulldog Moral was the flower girl in our wedding. We didn't have any kids at the time, and she was like our child. So, of course we had to have her in our wedding, and she sat there with stood there with the bridesmaid, should I say, throughout the ceremony. It was a really cool experience to have her there. She's in tons of wedding pictures. It was just a fun day altogether, and we were glad that Moral was able to share that with us. Well, unfortunately, about a month later, Christmas Day 2009, we noticed that Moral's little cough that had been going on for quite some time, but we never really thought anything of it, really progressed and got worse that day. And it got to the point where the evening rolled around, Christmas evening, we're celebrating, and Moral's cough just seemed to get worse and worse. Her demeanor was real low. Her, lack of energy, she just really wasn't herself. So we said, you know what, even though it's Christmas, let's go get her checked out. Something's just not right. One of those, gut feelings type situation. So we did so. We went and checked her out, got her checked out. We were living in Southern California at the time, took her to the local veterinarian hospital. Come to find out that Moral had an enlarged heart, and it was massive. And she was given 6 months maximum to live. Now, she was 3 years old at the time, just, early into her, being fully mature, just blindsided us completely. She was such a caring, loving dog, but very strong and athletic and just loved to play and full of energy. We were just surprised that she was dealing with this massive enlarged heart and that her life was going to end. So we wanted to do whatever we could to provide any option to just extend her life. We knew her heart was just too big. She wasn't going to make it. That was pretty, inevitable that she was going to pass. But we wanted to try and give her as much time as possible. So we took her to all the specialists and did the whole 9 yards in terms of healthcare to try and figure out different ways to extend her life. We went and saw a holistic vet at the time, and he said, you know what, there's not much we can do, but try and change her diet a little bit. And, that kind of opened up the doors once we started doing some research on diet, because before then it was like, oh yeah, just feed, get a decent brand of dog food, don't stay away from some of the pedigree and the lower end stuff, but try and get a decent. There's a huge factor in that comes into play with dogs and the diet that they're on, and especially with the kibble. So what this did is it kind of springboarded our way into looking at things more holistically, more natural. Unfortunately, she did pass away just a couple of months later, but it opened up our eyes to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to do things differently the next chance that I get with my animals. So of course, as dog people are, we acquired more dogs along the way. Now, fast forward to 2012, once again, I was presented with another health issue, and this time it was an infestation of fleas. So not as major as the cardiovascular stuff, but this time my dogs had a massive infestation of fleas. Now, of course, the mainstream way is to go ahead and go get the flea control, the chemical stuff that goes down the spine, especially back then. That was just the way that we managed fleas, right? But I said, you know what? I'm not comfortable with this situation. Once again, what it did is allowed me to start opening up my eyes and say, hey, do a bit of research before you just take a certain approach. And so once I started researching about the flea control, I realized that there was a lot of animals that were basically dying because of this. And there was a lot of animals that were injured from this chemical as well, all the chemicals. So I said, you know what, I got to do something different. Now we just barely got started with the essential oils. It was brand new to us, and my wife says, hey, you know what? We're using these oils for just about everything at the moment. Why don't you see if there's a couple of regimens we can use with the dogs against the fleas? And I said, that's a great idea. So that really sent me down this journey of studying essential oils. So I did a bit of research, I did my homework, and I realized that, oh yes, there are multiple ways that we can use essential oils with our animals, especially with fleas, but we need to make sure that there's a lot of safety involved, that there's some dilution involved, and everything else. So I had great success with that, though, the early days with my animals on combating fleas. And then what it did is it just took me from one thing to another. I was also dealing with the boxer with hip discomfort. I was also dealing with another elderly dog that was just trying to kind of, get around in her last years as well. So I started using the essential oils actively, and I kind of got this reputation of, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about in terms of using them. And I started teaching classes. Well, 2015, we had the opportunity to move to New Zealand, and I also had the opportunity to come study here at the College of Natural Health and Homeopathy, where I spent 4 years up until 2018 studying holistic health for animals. So started my practice in 2018, and here we are today. So this is a topic that I'm very passionate about because I want to teach people the basics of the fundamentals in terms of animal health care with our essential oils that we're so passionate about. So let's start with the basics. What is an essential oil? So an essential oil is the basic extract from the plant itself. Now, the plant produces this essential oil as a natural protection mechanism. It's like a built-in defense system for the plant itself. It's vital to the plant. And what it provides for the plant is protection in its environment. So not only can it survive, but it also can thrive. It protects the plant from different types of pests. It protects the plant from fungus, from bacteria, from virus. All these different ways that it provides protection for the plant so it can ultimately survive. So when we're talking about essential oils that we find in the marketplace, we're talking about highly concentrated versions, right? So we're extracting the essential oil from the plants, and typically you're going to need a lot of plant material to get a small amount of essential oil. So therefore, less is more. And that's very important when we're talking about essential oils for animals. Less is more. They can be 50 to 70 times more powerful than our herbal remedies, than our herbal tinctures. So they're highly effective when we're using them appropriately. So why doTERRA? Why, after the number of years that I've been using these essential oils and then went to school and became a practitioner, why do I still choose to use doTERRA? The one thing that stands out above every other essential oil manufacturer is their quality control methods. Now, this is called CPTG. It's basically a high-level quality control system that doTERRA has in place to make sure that every time we grab one of those little brown bottles, it has been tested thoroughly, it is 100% pure, and that's extremely important when we're using them with animals. And that starts at the sourcing. The plants are sourced all over the world, making sure that they find the best of the best organic plant material, providing high-quality essential oil. They're harvested at the most opportune time, which is very important in terms of the certain components that we find in the constituents that we find within the essential oil. All depends on the harvesting. That can be certain times of the day, that can be certain times of the year, that can be the size of the plant. A lot of factors come into play. Every batch is also rigorously tested by a third party. Now, I like to stay neutral in my holistic health practice, and at times I'll be working with clients. They'll approach me looking to use a certain oil, essential oil, with their animals, right? So I never say, "Oh, you don't use that," right? You got to use doTERRA. I just take more of a neutral approach. But what I do ask them is, I say, well, as long as you can provide me the third-party testing on that specific bottle, then go ahead and use that. But please provide me that first, and then I can make some recommendations. And 100% of the time, I haven't had anybody return that test to me to show that it's 100% pure. And what the purity guarantees is that there's no toxins, contaminants, microorganisms, or natural fillers. That's another one that, can be misconstrued in the industry. We see this organic essential oil. That does not mean 100% pure essential oil. What can happen if corners are cut in the industry, other parts of the plant can come along during the extraction process, and those are called natural fillers, right? So with natural fillers, you can have more sensitivity to allergies. You can also have, and they're just going to be less effective. Now, they're not going to be as harmful as like a synthetic essential oil with the animals, but they're just not going to be as effective. Therefore, in my opinion, pretty much wasting money. Plus, you always have that the allergic response that you see with essential oils that are not 100% pure. So let me just, tap into that real quick. There are no allergens within essential oils. That is found in other parts of the plant. But see, if the extraction process isn't highly controlled and those other parts of the plant come along, then boom, that's where we get some issues in regards to allergies. Okay, so now I want to break it down, the simple guidelines. So please try and take notes here if you can. These are very important guidelines. So we're using these essential oils safely, we're using them properly, and we're using them in a way that is appropriate. So first off, we need to know our species. Okay, so we can't just use any essential oil that we have within the home, even if it is doTERRA, with any species that we have as well. There's some species that are going to be a bit more sensitive than others. Okay, so we're going to cover that here in the presentation. We also need to know the health and the age of the animal, because that's going to be very important in terms of how we are going to dilute the essential oil. And then we also need to know the mannerisms, the body language, how our animals communicate with us. That is extremely important when we're using essential oils, because they are going to let us know, first off, if they are okay with that certain essential oil that's being used within the home, regardless if it's being used on them. But also that we're going to talk about aromatic selection here in a moment, and how that can be highly effective when we want to use them directly with the animal. So the first guideline I want to speak about is reading the reaction of the animal, especially when we're talking about avoidance. Okay, so let's just take, for example, if you are diffusing oils for your own health care, and you notice that your cat, your dog, or, let's say your, any other animal that you may have in the home or out in the paddock, if you notice that the animal is avoiding you when you have a certain essential oil around, that's a good indication that that specific essential oil is not mixing well with that certain animal. Animals are highly sensitive. They rely heaps on their sensitivity and on their senses. And because of that, they can be a little bit more sensitive than we are. So if you notice this avoidance, this is the big one. I'm going to tell a lot of stories along the way just to paint some pictures. A good example of this is when I first got started with that flea concoction, which I'll share with you later down in the presentation. I had one dog, the elderly dog. She kept avoiding me every time I came out with this combination. And I really didn't know what was going on. Very novice, just got started with essential oils myself. So I noticed that she continued to walk away and avoid me. She'd go sit along the wall, try and keep her distance anytime I brought out the oils. So it wasn't until probably the second or third day when I realized, you know what, I think she's trying to tell me something. I think she's avoiding me for a certain reason. So I did a bit more research and came to a conclusion that she was avoiding me because it wasn't mixing well with her system. It was bothering her for one reason or another. Might not have been harmful in terms of, anything that would hurt her, but it could just not have been mixing well with her system. Okay, bothering her for some way or another. So read that make sure that you read the reaction, especially when we're talking about avoidance. You always want to make it a positive experience with the animal. Okay, so it's a lot of rewarding, a lot of love, a lot of affection, a lot of attention. You can use treats. I still do. I use, my flea combination during feeding time. That way, they always associate the essential oils with food, right? So then, therefore, they're always excited because they always, make the connection that they're going to get some type of food or treat. Or what have it. So always make it a positive experience. What you don't want to do is force the essential oils onto the animal, because what that causes is fear. It's going to create this negative experience, and therefore the animal is going to be less likely to want to engage anytime you have essential oils around. And therefore it's going to be hard for you to even use them with yourself, because it's going to stress out the animal, even if you have them on or you're diffusing within the home. So make it a positive experience. Okay, so maybe if it's just diffusing in the house, turn the diffuser on and then feed the dog or feed the cat, right? Bring out your favorite treat with the horse in the paddock, and bring out the essential oils at the same time, so they make that association, that connection. Always make it a positive experience. So I also want to talk about aromatic selection. Now, this is extremely important when we're trying to figure out which essential oil to use with our animals, right? They will actually let us know. They will specifically tell us which one is best for them. Now, this is used through a method called aromatic selection. Now, what you do here, we have our essential oils and they cross over so well, right? We can use 5, 6, 7 different oils for one different health challenge, right? So what I teach my clients to do is start off with just 3 oils, okay? So let's say we're dealing with a skin situation. We start off with 3 oils. We introduce those oils to the animal, invite them in, allow them to smell and engage. So you can just keep the lids on, put the bottles on the ground. Let's say if it's your cat or your dog, invite them in, watch how they engage with each individual oil. Because what that's going to do is indicate which one is best for them by how they respond to smelling that essential oil, okay? Great example for this is a golden retriever that I was working with a couple of years ago. Now, she was dealing with heavy amounts of anxiety, right? So what we did is she was even scared of the little brown bottles that we put on the ground. So we used, she was an elderly dog, so didn't have an issue with chewing things up. So we used 3 separate socks. We put 1 drop of each oil separately on 3 separate socks. We invited her into the room. Now she went up to the first one. She smelt it, moved on quickly to the second one, smelt it again. Then she went to the 3rd sock. Now that one, she smelt it. She looked up at the owner. She gave a little bit of a tail wag. She went down and she smelt it for a second time, right? Boom. Indicating to us that she was making that selection for her own condition. So that's aromatic selection. Read the body language. If they show some type of positive mannerism, then basically that is indicating to you that that essential oil is the one for them. Okay, so let them pick and choose. Now, golden rule here, we're dealing with a super concentrated version of plant material, so the animals can be very sensitive, even for our own self, right? We need to keep it out of the eyes, the ears, the nose, and other sensitive areas. So we never put the essential oil inside the eye or inside and down in the ear, especially not up the nose or any other sensitive area. Now, we always need to dilute the essential oils before we apply them topically onto the animal. Always dilute with the carrier oil. Now, water is not a diluter. Many of you may know that already, but that's even more important when we're talking about animal health care. I prefer fractionated coconut oil because it's very healthy for the coat of the animal. If we're talking about cats, dogs, horses, any of the large animals as well. Very healthy for the skin, and it has its own benefits to it, and it absorbs nicely. Almond oil is another option. I know, some animals may be sensitive to coconut or whatever. Almond oil is another option. The only reason I don't like almond oil because it sits on top of the coat for a little bit longer, and it's just a little bit more, quote unquote, greasier in a way. So fractionated coconut oil, that's the one for me. That's my recommendation there, but we always have to dilute. And I'll teach you the dilution ratios here in a bit. Always have an escape route. This is another very important factor. We cannot, especially those indoor animals, we cannot lock them in a bedroom and diffuse the essential oil. Okay, even for ourselves, like if we're trying to deal with some type of, respiratory challenge, let's say for ourselves, and our animal sleeps in the room, we need to make sure the door is open so they can go out, take a break, get some fresh air if needed. Any of the animals that are caged within a room, we always need to, make sure that the room needs to be highly ventilated, and therefore not closing a caged animal inside a room and diffusing, or we just need to diffuse in another room and to kind of keep away from there, especially with the birds, because I know that, a lot of those birds, the smaller birds, can be a bit sensitive to the essential oil. So make sure you got some good ventilation, or just choose to diffuse in another room. Okay, always have an escape route. Oh, let me just back up. And if you notice that anytime you put on a certain oil, you need to start paying attention to these little things. Even if you decide not to use the essential oils with your animals, even if you're using them within the home, you still need to pay attention to the details on how the animal is responding. Okay, so if you turn on the diffuser with lavender and the cat always leaves the room at that point in time, it's a good indication that lavender, for whatever reason, is not mixing well with that cat. Right? Now, lavender is generally, okay for cats, but the issue is that there's some individuality as well that it's involved, just like us. Some people just can't stand lavender. It just bothers them, and for whatever reason, right? So you need to keep note of this, on what essential oils the animals are responding in somewhat of an avoidance manner to. Okay, so let's break down a few more safety tips here. Use caution around animals that are pregnant, animals that are nursing, the young, the elderly, and animals on medication. Okay, we just need to be cautious with these animals. I like to say, dilute a bit more. And that includes your topical flea treatment. If you do choose, I know that the East Coast is bad, for the ticks, especially with Lyme disease and whatnot. And some people will say, you know what, I have to make sure my animal is protected, especially because there's, a factor with the family and everything else. And I understand that. So just keep taking note here, though. If you do apply the topical stuff down the spine, you cannot use the essential oils, even if they're diluted, down the spine for at least 3 weeks. What it does is it just that topical flea treatment causes a bit of sensitivity to the skin, and then therefore can cause a bit more aggravation. So I like to avoid that area altogether if the topical flea treatment is being applied. Okay, so animals that are pregnant, we need to avoid clove and cypress, eucalyptus, ginger, marjoram, peppermint, oregano. Nursing animals, these are lactating mothers. We need to avoid peppermint. This can has the possibility to slow down milk production. So therefore, let's avoid that one for any nursing mothers. Now, animals that are epileptic or prone to seizures, we need to avoid basil, camphor, eucalyptus, fennel, rosemary, wintergreen, clary sage. Now, we see less negative response. This list is a somewhat general. It's a general list, not specifically talking about doTERRA's essential oils, but just just throwing essential oils in one pot. Now, not all essential oils are equal. We know we're using a high quality oil, so we see less negative response. But for me, I like to just be cautious all around. We can always find an essential oil that crosses over and does similar things as any of these on the list, right? So let's say we are looking to use eucalyptus for a respiratory situation with the dog, but the dog is also prone to seizures, then we just need to find another option. Cedarwood is also great for respiratory. Cardamom is also great for respiratory, right? So you see what I'm saying? We can always find another one in replacement. Now, animals with bleeding disorders, we need to avoid birch, blue tansy, cassia, cinnamon, clove, fennel, ginger, oregano, and wintergreen. Now, I want you to continue to educate yourself. Now, my favorite resource, a book that came out a number of years after I got involved in this this topic, is Spoil Your Pet. Now, this is also written by a veterinarian and actually an infectious disease scientist who are also involved with doTERRA. And what they did is they came together and did a number of studies within the veterinarian practice and studied blood work and how these animals were responding to essential oils. Therefore, they've done some in-depth homework and research to make sure that they are making proper recommendations in terms of animal health care with these essential oils. So that's a great source. They just came out with their Spoil Your Pet version 2, I think about a year ago. Phenomenal book and a great resource. So continue to educate yourself. There's heaps of textbooks and whatnot if you want to go down that road as well. But what I'm teaching you today is just the basics. So just give you, some familiarity on how to use these essential oils. Okay, so now I want to get specific with the species. I'm not going to cover every species, but just the more popular ones. Cats, topically, we need to avoid basil, citrus, cinnamon, clove, dill, fennel, tea tree, oregano, peppermint, thyme, rosemary, spearmint, and wintergreen. I know it's a big list. Let's just take caution, right? And then if you have a blend that may include some of these oils, you see less negative response with the blends because it's not like let's say cinnamon, that's also found in our On Guard blend, which I'll talk about here down the track. It's not in high concentration as it would be just cinnamon by itself, right? So therefore, it's just less, it doesn't have that negative response as we see with just a 100% pure cinnamon. Okay, so dogs topically. Birch, tea tree, wintergreen. Now your pocket pets, this is a big one, especially your herbivores, talking about your chinchillas, rabbits, maybe it's even a hamster if you want to go down that route. We need to avoid oregano, cinnamon, thyme, clove, and tea tree. Now the reason why, especially with these little herbivores, because their digestive system is so delicate. There's a lot of fermentation going on, so they can digest plant material. So these oils might disrupt that fermentation just slightly, and then therefore cause a bit of digestive issues. So just keep caution with these oils if you have the pocket pets. Now rats are a little different because they're omnivores, right? They don't have that high fermentation going on. But heavily diluted essential oil is a mandatory with all of our pets, but especially with the pocket pets. And I'll teach you those ratios here in a minute. Now, birds, we just want to use caution all around. It's hard for me to make any recommendations in terms of health care with birds. We just need to be safe around them, especially the small caged birds, your little parakeets and whatnot. Make sure we're not trapping them in a room and diffusing for large amounts of time. Now, your bigger birds, they can be a little bit more tolerable. I'm talking about like your chicken, your ducks. We like to use the essential oils heavily diluted with them, heavily diluted, and we like to apply them on the bottom of the toes, chicken feet, so to speak. Now, large animals, they're pretty hardy, especially when we're using the essential oil properly with them. There's no real kind of contraindication in terms of what to use with the large animals. I like to use a similar method with the dogs in terms of dilution. So let's go over the methods of application, and we'll talk about dilution here in a minute. So the aromatic approach, we always need to use a water diffuser. We can't use the nebulizers. Those are the ones that directly connect to the essential oil bottle. That's putting out way too much aroma for the animals. So the water diffuser, it somewhat of acts as, somewhat of a diluter, so to speak. So it dilutes the molecules just slightly. It's less concentrated, let's put it that way, less concentrated up in the air. Or what you can use is the palm technique. So that's 1 drop in the palm of your hand. Rub your hands together and then allow the animal to breathe in from there. Now make sure that you're really rubbing it in nice so it absorbs, the majority of it absorbs into your hand, and then allow your animal to smell. So that's like for on the go stuff, right? If you got the horse, you're riding the horse, you know, go on a good run on the beach or whatever, and she becomes spooked for whatever reason, maybe keep your oil with you. You can hop off, you know, calm the horse down, 1 drop in the palm of your hand, and just let her breathe it in. Or if you're walking the dog, right, the big Rottweiler up the road always causes some anxiety with your dog because he runs up to the fence and he's causing havoc. And what you can do is just before you even get to that situation, be proactive with it. Stop, pull out your oil, use the palm technique, allow your dog to breathe in those oils and start to calm down, because the dog's already preparing. She knows that Rottweiler's coming up in a few houses, and her body's already starting to prepare emotionally with that anxiousness, right? So that's exactly it. The aromatic approach is the best way to help balance emotions. I see this quite often in my practice. Animals that are emotionally unstable present with physical ailments, and then just the opposite. We have injured animals that are, you know, emotionally that are challenged emotionally, right? So, you know, they're dealing with, you know, sadness, or they're dealing with, you know, any of the other emotions, you know, gloom and everything else, because of the fact that they're injured and they can't do what they want to do, right? So balancing emotions for me is very important to how we manage animal health care. Now, cleansing the air is another great way to use the essential oils aromatically. This is especially those indoor animals. It's going to cleanse the air. You know, I have 2 cats and 2 dogs live in the home, 1 litter box. You know, they're always chewing on the stinky hooves and everything else. You know, we live on a farm here, so they can just get a bit stinky themselves. So we always like to diffuse essential oils to help keep the air cleansed and fresh. This is also a great way to microdose your animal, right? So what I call the microdosing approach is basically the water diffuser. You're getting small amounts, very small amounts of the essential oil, but very consistent and very frequently through the